The gods turn the entire world into a game, and when the final quest closes, only one player is still breathing. Sehan Kim stands alone beneath a glowing notice telling him he has successfully completed everything. 10 years of fighting, and the prize is an empty planet, a dead sky, and nobody left to share it with. He calls it a lonely world, and the name fits because every other player is gone. Before he lets the game masters enjoy their victory, he opens the store built from the points he hoarded across a decade, and finds one item still available to him, sitting there like an oversight nobody bothered to close. A second package. A completely new playthrough, unlocked for 1,000,000 points with special bonuses carried over from the run that killed everyone else. He buys it. Light swallows him, a cheerful message wishes him a great time, and Sehan wakes 10 years in the past, carrying everything the gods accidentally taught him. Rewind to the moment just before that. The system congratulates him on clearing the game, and the notice hangs there like a joke, because clearing it meant outliving everybody. The quests were never random. They were assigned, arranged, and scored by game masters who watched from somewhere above the board and enjoyed every second. He understands exactly what he is looking at. Pale figures drift above the ruined world, trailing threads like puppeteers who never once stepped onto the stage themselves. They handed out missions, set the difficulty, and rewarded whoever entertained them most, and they risked nothing at all while an entire species died for their amusement. Sehan notes the difference between himself and the rest. Others took part in this directly through an avatar, working the board from a safe distance while the people below did the dying. He had no such shortcut. Whatever he built across those 10 years, he built inside the game rather than above it. If this is not a bad ending, he says, then he does not know what one looks like. The world is finished. There's nothing left to rebuild and nobody left to rebuild it with. He is the champion of a tournament with no audience, standing on a scoreboard that stopped mattering when the last person died. So he decides to be difficult. He wanted at minimum to spoil things for the ones who arranged all of this, and he spends his final hours hunting for any lever the system left within reach. There is only one path out of the scenario he is standing in, and he starts looking for it. The store is the answer. Points earned through kills, quests, and achievements can be spent on downloadable content, and Sehan spent 10 years being frugal in a world where saving looked sane. Late in the run, he stopped buying comfort and started stockpiling, and now that stubbornness is the only currency he still has. The listing is short. A second playthrough, complete and fresh, with special bonuses attached, priced at exactly 1,000,000 points. It is the sort of offer that should never exist for a man who has already lost everything, and Sehan reads it twice before deciding the game masters were careless rather than generous. He confirms the purchase. Blue light tears upward through him, the world dissolves into a storm of sparks, and a golden screen politely asks him to have a great time. It is the friendliest thing the system has ever said to him, and it is the last thing he hears before everything resets. Then noise. Traffic chatter, sunlight bouncing off buildings that should be rubble by now. Sen opens his on a street he has not walked in 10 years, surrounded by people who have no idea what is coming. He says quietly that he is really back, and the date is August 17th. August 17th is the day everything begins. Sehan sits on a park bench beside a friend, blinking at ordinary sunlight and ordinary boredom, and the strangeness of it hits him harder than any monster ever did. He slumps forward, exhausted by an entire life that the world around him has not lived through yet. His friend asks what is wrong, and Sehan almost tells him the truth. He admits that he has been playing a non-stop game of life and death, and that he just came back from finishing the ending. It sounds like a joke about staying up too late, so nobody presses him further. He says thank you for everything, which is not what a bored student says on a summer afternoon. His friend does not notice the weight in it. Sehan watches him and quietly realizes he cannot remember what happened to this person during the first playthrough, and that missing detail bothers him more than expected. That is the cruelty of 10 years of survival. Faces blur. People he ate lunch with become names he can no longer place, because everything after this afternoon turned into a decade of running. He has come back with knowledge of monsters and systems, and almost none of the ordinary things he should have kept. Then a voice nearby asks what that thing over there is. San's head comes up immediately. He remembers this. 10 years ago he said almost exactly that, and everything started the moment the words left her mouth. The countdown he's been dreading since he opened his eyes has already finished without him noticing. Green figures come around the corner, short and hunched and grinning. Goblins. The crowd reacts the way any crowd would, laughing about costumes, wondering whether they are child actors, guessing that a film crew must be set up somewhere out of sight. Phones come out. Nobody actually moves away from it. The crowd starts running, and Sehan knows immediately that this is the worst possible decision. Goblins prey on whatever flees from them. Scattered targets with their backs turned are exactly what these things are built for, and the street turns from a curiosity into a hunting ground within a few seconds. They stab, they tear, and they do all of it while smiling. That detail stayed with Sehan for a decade. The monsters enjoy the work. People who were arguing about camera crews a minute earlier are on the pavement, and the ones still standing scream and shove and make themselves easier to catch. Blood hits him. A voice shouts for Sehan to look out. A blade comes down somewhere close, and the warmth lands across his face and shoulders. It is the exact moment he has carried in his memory for 10 years, and living through it again does not make it any easier. Because this happened before. 10 years ago he left Jisoo behind and ran for his life, and he survived the game partly because of choices exactly like that one. He has spent a decade knowing what he traded away for it, and the guilt never faded with time or with any victory. This time he refuses. He says it plainly to himself, standing in the middle of a street that is already turning red, that he will not do it again. It is not a heroic speech, and there is nobody around to hear it, but it is the first real decision of his second run. The system chooses that moment to catch up with him. Notices stack up in front of his eyes. The store is open thanks to his first playthrough completion bonus. His leftover points are being transferred across. Forum access has been granted, and it will activate once synchronization between the two runs finishes. The rules arrive as helpfully as a tutorial. Points can be spent to raise stats or to buy items of his choosing, and Sehan notes that most video games follow the same general logic. That familiarity is not comforting. It means the people running this thought carefully about it before aiming it at Earth. It also means he is holding an advantage nobody else has. Every other person on this street is starting from zero, while he walks in with a stock store and exclusive access to purchases the newcomers cannot even see yet. Pay to win, he thinks, and for once he is the one paying. Around him, hands shake. People stare at screens that have appeared in front of their faces, unable to close them and unable to look away. Light spears down out of a clear sky and lands somewhere in the city, and the announcements keep arriving whether anybody wants to read them or not. The system states that there will be penalties for those who fail to complete their assignments. It offers no detail, no appeal, and no comfort at all. For further information, it says refer to the player instructions, as though everyone was handed a manual on the way into the worst day of their lives. What does that even mean? Someone demands. A game another repeats, and the word travels through the crowd as a question rather than an answer. Murmurs turn into arguments. People who have just Watched neighbors die are being told to participate, and there's no authority anywhere left to complain to. Sehan keeps his own reactions small. If he looks like he already understands what is happening, the difficulty of his quests could rise to match him. These are not hosts who let an advantage slide quietly, so he plays the part of a frightened student while calculating routes and timings in his head. Others reach the same conclusions more slowly. The notifications, the voices in their heads, the announcements, nobody can silence. All of it points in one direction. Reality is no longer what it was an hour ago. Saying it aloud does not help, but people say it anyway because naming a thing feels control. The system adds one more line almost cheerfully. Rewards will vary for each player depending on their achievements, so active participation is encouraged. It is an open invitation to compete over corpses, and the ones who take it seriously fastest will become the most dangerous problem in this city within days. Jisoo is still on her feet with her fists clenched, holding herself together while the street comes apart. She has not run and she has not frozen completely, and that alone changes the shape of this run. The person Sehan abandoned last standing right next to him now. Goblins move through the streets in packs, shrieking, chasing anything that breaks cover. Sehan measures them the way you measure familiar enemies. A single goblin is roughly as strong as a fully grown man at best. The danger is numbers, panic, and open ground, not any individual monster in the group. He explains that once people start to group up, things will calm down for a little while. Crowds fight back, isolated stragglers do not. That short window of stability is what he intends to use, and he is already thinking past it toward whatever the system schedules next for the sake of entertainment. So he picks a destination instead of simply fleeing. He reasons there must be a safe area the monsters cannot enter, because a game that kills every participant immediately is a boring game. He tells Jisoo to move with him, steel scrapes, and something goes down before it can reach her. What exactly are those things? A survivor shouts and nobody answers him. Sehan is looking somewhere else entirely. There are eyes on not the goblins, not the fleeing crowd, but something floating that most people never notice, hanging in the air and turning slowly to follow whoever is most interesting. He explains it to himself, since he cannot explain it out loud. The gods monitor players through observers for exactly one reason: entertainment. Every scream, every clever escape, and every failure is content for an audience nobody down here can see, and that audience has already picked out its favorites. Those favorites become avatars. A god chooses a player it likes and lends that player's strength, which is the fastest way anybody in this city is gonna get powerful. Sehan watches the observers drift overhead and keeps his own name out of their conversation for as long as he possibly can. Half an hour he thinks an Archytas already moved. That is why the name never climbs into the top tier of game masters, because the man's not got an ounce of patience in him. Sehan files under good news, since an impatient overseer had gaps he can use. A screen opens in front of him that Jisoo cannot see. It is a notice, formal and bureaucratic, announcing that Earth has been chosen as the arena for a new role-playing game. Beneath it sit forum boards, an introduction section, general discussion guides, and a chat room already filling with traffic. The chat is the real prize. Sehan skims it and realizes the participants are discussing him and Jisoo directly, which means he can fish for information from the other side of the table. He decides against posting immediately. Better to read first, learn the tone, and speak only when it is useful. Some sections refuse to open. A red mark tells him his main quest is incomplete, and he guesses access unlocks by progression level rather than by permission. It is a slow leak of information doled out to keep players pushing forward, and he intends to force it open faster than intended. He also cannot tell how much of his previous run actually carried across. Points transferred and the store opened, but abilities and records are unclear and the system offers no explanation. Working half-blind on old memories is risky, so he builds every plan around the possibility that something has quietly changed. Elsewhere, survivors begin organizing themselves. A man tells the people around him that he does not understand what is happening, but that they will be fine if they stick together, and it works. Frightened people want instructions. Groups form, the monsters find fewer easy targets, and the streets get marginally safer. Jisoo stops asking questions. She has decided without being told that Sehan knows more than he is saying and that arguing about it will not keep her alive. He notes how fast she adapts and admits makes things easier for him, since explaining the actual truth would only sound insane. She says she is getting hungry, smiles, and suggests that they move. It is such an ordinary sentence in such an extraordinary hour that it almost knocks him off balance. He agrees, and the two of them walk out into a city where the rules have changed and almost nobody has finished reading them. Above them, the spectators keep talking shop. 20,000 points for a wound recovery is called a bargain, because it also raises point income by a fifth. One complains that his players simply died off while praying instead of fighting. Another laughs that everyone in his area went berserk with guns. Sehan starts training her the moment they have a spare minute. Focus on defense, he tells Jisoo. Do not swing at everything that moves. Survive first, because dead players never improve. It is blunt coaching from somebody who learned all of it the expensive way, and she takes the instructions seriously. He drops game logic into the conversation without thinking, then covers for by saying that is simply how most video games work and every addict knows it. Jisoo gives him a long look. He watches her file the moment away and understands that his cover story is already wearing thin. Then he hands her a plan and a role. He is counting on her, he says, and he will take care of the rest, and he asks whether she thinks she can do it. She says she will try, and asks the obvious question. Where did he possibly find all these potions? The first thing he names is a perfume of temptation, an item he uses to shape the fight before it starts. Sehan is not matching the goblin's strength for strength. He is arriving with preparation nobody else in this city can buy yet, and letting that preparation do most of the work. She asks whether beating the leader is really necessary, since the objective of the quest was only to escape. It is a fair question. Sehan answers it with action instead of theory, because clearing the leader collapses the entire pack, and because he wants the points that come attached to it. The strike lands before she can follow it. One motion and the thing in front of him drops. She stares and demands to know how he just did that, and he says nothing useful, because the honest answer involves a decade of practice that has not happened yet in her version of time. The leader is bigger, faster, and angrier than the rest, and its red eye finds him immediately. Sehan takes hits he could have avoided, positions himself where the pack cannot flank him, and turns a boss fight into an exercise in patience, while Jisoo keeps stragglers away from his back. The finish is fast and messy, a heavy impact and a wet burst of color. And then the noise drops out of the street. Sehan straightens up with his breathing under control and goes straight to his notifications, because in this world a fight ends and the accounting starts immediately afterwards. He puts 10 points into strength immediately. The change is small but real, a body that responds slightly faster than it should, and he notes it the way a mechanic notes a tuned engine. Every point matters at this stage because he is building from nothing while pretending to be nobody special. His status window lists him plainly. Sehan Kim, title second playthrough player, traits single player with strength, agility, magilth, and ability all laid out in numbers. The trait's not flattering. It says out loud that he has chosen to walk this alone without a god standing anywhere behind him, and without any allies to fall back. He decides to hold the rest of his points back and raise stats later, once he knows exactly what he needs. Spending early feels good and wins nothing. It is the same discipline that bought him a second playthrough, and he applies it now with the same irritating patience as before. Then something changes in the goblins around him. They are frightened, and not of him. Under the rotting smell of the pack there is fresh blood everywhere, far more of it than the fight explains. San swears and starts running, cause he left Jisoo alone for a few minutes and knows better. He cuts through everything in his path. A blade takes a goblin across the face, green sprays outward, and he does not slow down to watch it fall. The last time he ran during a moment like this, he ran away. This time he is running toward the person he abandoned. What he finds is not the rescue he was bracing for. Jisoo is on her feet and the fighting around her is over, and Sehan says her name like a question, because nothing he knows about her explains how she is standing here at all while everything around her has stopped moving. There are others here too. Jonghyun's name comes out of the confusion, and somebody is on the ground not responding. The reconstruction is simple enough. He was fine when Sehan first saw him and went under at some point during the chaos, which is all anyone can establish while the street is still in this state. The answer is a red mask burning in the air like a warning label. Sehan recognizes it instantly and hates that he does. It belongs to the Celestial Slayer, a power he knows by reputation, and that reputation includes users losing them to madness whenever the ability is not fully controlled. He watches her carefully for the signs. Jisoo's not showing any of those characteristics yet, but the word yet is doing heavy work in that sentence. He decides to keep an eye on her, and the real question becomes what he does with information she does not have about herself. Hiding it feels wrong. She's one carrying the power and the risk, and he is standing there calculating disclosure timings like a man managing an asset. He settles for a warning instead. That is enough, he says. The skill can put her in danger if she uses it too often. Then he proposes a party and phrases it badly. Jisoo misreads him completely and goes red, and Sehan has to clarify that he meant the system function and nothing else. It is the first genuinely funny moment either of them has had since the world ended, and it lands extremely awkwardly. The system approves the party, then denies him the thing he actually wanted. He has no ability available to use for skill sharing. Sehan blinks at the message and works out the rule behind it. Sharing requires that both sides bring something. Right now he brings nothing except experience. The reason for leaving comes back to the same rule he stated earlier. The objective of the quest was to escape, so clearing every monster inside is optional and finishing the objective is not. Sehan would rather bank a completed quest than bleed for credit nobody is actually offering him. Her personality starts leaking out once the fear drops away. She teases him, needles him, and thoroughly enjoys watching him squirm until he gives in and tells her to take it away from him. Sehan wonders whether this is who she actually is, and whether he ever knew that before. His attention swings back to strategy. Somebody in this district gathered panicking civilians and evacuated them, which is not a small achievement. That takes a sharp mind, calm under pressure, and enough reputation for strangers to obey. Whoever managed it is now the single most valuable person in the area. So he offers Jisoo a choice with only one real answer. She can stay here alone, or she can lead the way. She glares at him. They move. The next problem is finding that safe zone before the system decides the survivors had quite enough time to catch their breath. The safe zone turns out to be real. Sehan finds it with green blood still drying on his hands, and it is the only piece of good news the day has produced. Inside, people are stretched out on the floor, badly bandaged, and there are far more injured than he expected to see. Somebody did this properly. While most people were still arguing about what they were looking at, a leader pulled survivors out of the streets and got them behind walls. Sehan reasons it had to be someone calm, trustworthy, and already respected, because panicking strangers do not follow a known voice anywhere. The name he hears is Hyung-Yun, the student council president. Smart, liked, and good-looking enough that people were half following him before the monsters ever arrived. He has proven himself in the only way that matters today, which is that the people who listen to him are still alive. Sehan looks up and finds shapes drifting near the ceiling, purple and formless. Observers. The gods are already interested in this room, which tells him the leader here is being evaluated as a potential avatar. That makes recruiting him urgent because Sehan is clearly not the only one shopping. Hyung-Yun is suspicious of the messages, which is the correct instinct. He has no idea whether the gods can be trusted and no way at all to test them. Sehan uses that gap. He mentions the notification that the hobgoblin has been defeated and lets the man confirm it himself. The hobgoblin is dead, so the goblins are in a daze, scattered and without direction. Sehan explains it plainly. Somebody threw all of them into a game for amusement, and the monsters are as much a part of the design as the quest, the shop, and the penalties for failure. What does he mean, somebody a survivor demands? Does he know something about this? It is exactly the reaction Sehan wanted to avoid and exactly the one he expected, so he answers just enough to sound informed without sounding impossible. While everyone standing in earshot quietly decides how much of it they are willing to believe. He watches Hyung-Yun's responses and concludes the man is only as much as a beginner. That confirms it. He is not an avatar yet, which means there is still a window to pull him onto a human side of this before a god makes the offer first. That window closes quickly. There is a second clock running as well. The gods have almost certainly registered that the hobgoblin died and bored spectators demand new entertainment. Sehan knows what usually follows a lull like this. Something larger is being prepared, and the people resting on this floor have no idea they are between acts. Then a name lands that flattens Sehan's expression completely: Dongwon Park. It is impossible for him not to remember this man, and the remembering is not fond. Somebody remarks that it is nice to see a familiar face already in a place like this, and the temperature in the room shifts. Dongwon has been listening. He says he overheard something ridiculous being put to Hyung-Yun, and repeats the escape plan as though the words discredit themselves. Sehan asks him what exactly is ridiculous about it, and the argument stops being about monsters and becomes about who the group is going to trust. Sehan recognizes the technique because he watched it work last time. Dongwon talks about the group's interests, sounds perfectly reasonable, and enjoys making organizations crumble from the inside. Every word is a wedge. In a room this frightened, a persuasive man does far more lasting damage to morale than any of the monsters still waiting outside. Sehan explains what he has confirmed in the field. When you kill one of the monsters, its name appears above its head like a label, which is how he knows they are goblins rather than something more complicated. Small detail, enormous implication. The world has an interface now, and interfaces mean design. A news broadcast is still running somewhere. It reports bizarre creatures appearing all over the world with a figure for Seoul on screen that the report never finishes explaining. Whatever the number means, the scale is obvious. This is not one street or one district, and no country has an answer. The military and the police are unavailable, and there is no estimate for when help arrives. That single line does more to change the room than any monster did. Institutions are gone. The survivors here are on their own, and the only structures left are the ones they build for themselves. One man sighs and gives in, saying he has no choice, so he will follow Hyung-Yun as well. That is how the group actually forms. Not through inspiration, but through exhaustion, with people picking the least frightening option available and hoping the person in front knows something they do not. San takes one look at Dongguan and knows the situation is worse than it appears. The man has already become a chosen avatar. Somebody up there liked what they saw and handed him power early, which explains the confidence and makes every conversation in this room a negotiation with the audience. An armed survivor confronts Hyungyun for leaving, furious that he intends to walk out and take people with him. The argument is really about who gets to decide, and Sehan watches quietly, because a group that fractures now will lose members the moment it steps outside those doors. Jisoo asks whether they really have to leave like this. San says yes, they will get out soon enough if nothing unusual happens, and he means it as reassurance rather than as a prediction. He is running probabilities in his head, and unusual things have been arriving roughly every 20 minutes. He also has a colder reason for not making a scene. There are too many eyes on him here, and Hyungyun may prove useful later. Sehan is not looking for friends. He is assembling assets, and a leader with a loyal crowd is the most valuable one currently within his reach. They move, and the main entrance comes into view. Someone shouts that they can see it. Someone else says they have never been so glad to see a door in their entire life. For a moment, the plan looks like it will simply work, which in this world is a warning sign. The ground moves. An earthquake, somebody yells, and the walls answer with dust and cracking stone. Sehan already knows better than that. Earthquakes do not arrive on schedule at the exact moment a group reaches an exit, and the timing is far too convenient for anyone still pretending this is natural. A minotaur arrives, and Sehan recognizes it without enjoying the recognition, because this thing belongs to the first main quest and should not be anywhere near a crowd of untrained civilians. The shaking was never an earthquake. It was the schedule moving forward, and the intermission is now well and truly over. He works out the intent immediately. Enemies at this stage are tuned so that ordinary players can defeat them by teaming up, which means the fight is winnable and the panic is not. People start screaming at each other to run, and Sehan knows that scattering into open ground is worse. Is running even the right choice, he asks himself, and the answer is no. A creature built for this stage will chase down a fleeing crowd and pick them apart from behind. Standing together is safer, but standing together requires somebody to hold the front, and volunteers are in short supply. Hyungyun is caught between two impossible options. He has always considered himself rational, and rational arithmetic here means accepting losses in order to save a majority. Saying that out loud in front of the people who would be the losses is another matter entirely, and the effort of saying it visibly costs him something real. He bows. He apologizes out loud, admits he does not know how much time can be bought, and says there is no other choice available. It is the most honest thing anybody has said all day, and it is also a request that somebody stand between a monster and everyone else. Sehan moves before the argument finishes. He has already run the numbers on this fight in a previous life, and he knows the crowd needs seconds rather than heroism. He takes the front, sets his feet, and the thumping of the minotaurs approach dust off the walls around him. Now he shouts, "Run for it!" The crowd breaks and sprints, screaming, dragging one another along, and for a few seconds the plan works exactly as intended. People pour toward the exit while the monster's attention locks onto the one man who chose to staying directly in its path instead of running with everybody else. Then it hits him. The impact is enormous, a full swing that sends sand through the air and into stone, and the sound alone is enough to stop several people mid-stride. Somebody stares back, an expression that says nobody survives that, and for a long moment nobody is sure. Hyungyun keeps working. He calls out for everyone to check on the people around them to confirm the injured are still moving, and the group holds together because he refuses to let it dissolve. It is unglamorous leadership, and it is the reason the death toll is not far higher. Jisoo is apologizing. She says she is sorry, she says his name, and she starts a promise that moment never lets her finish. It is not the goodbye either of them would have chosen, and the crowd keeps moving, because stopping now would waste everything he just bought them with his own body. Alone with a monster, Sehan thinks about the kind of man he used to be. He was not much of a good guy in his previous life. Selfish by his own accounting, and honest enough with himself to admit the trait has not disappeared just because he came back here. But he came back knowing it, and that is the difference. Having lived through the version where he ran, he decides it would not be bad to choose a different path this time, and the decision is quieter and more convincing than any speech he could have made to that crowd. The Minotaur closes in, and the building takes the damage. Stone shatters, dust fills the corridor, and the thing roars somewhere inside the collapse. Sehan is still moving. He is hurt, he is outmatched on paper, and he has been in far worse situations with far fewer options than these. The people outside have every reason to assume he is dead. What Sehan is actually doing is measuring a boss, reading its swings and working out how much punishment he can take before the fight tips. Nothing about his approach looks like panic, and nothing about it looks improvised in the slightest. His status window is not impressive. Strength 17, Agility 26, Magic 3, Health 100, and no ability at all, every line stamped with rank F. Those are the numbers of a beginner, and he is using them against a monster designed to be handled by an organized group. He knows the ceiling as well. Rank F caps out at 100 points in a stat, which tells him exactly how much room he has before the next threshold. It also tells him he cannot win this by raising numbers. He will have to win it by playing better than it. The system gives the creature a name, and the name is Sentinel. That single word changes how Sehan reads the fight, because a sentinel is not a stray monster wandering into a crowd. It is something the game put here on purpose, and nobody in this building was meant to beat it alone. So Sehan fights it properly. He slips a charge, lets the horns pass close enough to tear cloth, and remarks this is finally balance, which is either confidence or gallows humor. Every dodge him information, and information is the only stat he owns that is not stuck at rank F. The Minotaur is stronger than he is, and it says so its whole body. Sehan lets it commit to a swing. When the attack overextends, he is already inside the arc, and the crack that follows is the sound of a fight ending in the half-second nobody outside was watching. He walks out of the dust. For his second playthrough, he says this is a reasonable start, and then he immediately gets practical about the payout. He wonders what the reward will be and admits a weapon would be nice, since he has nothing decent and a boss just proved it. Jisoo reaches him first and refuses to be impressed politely. She says he was still fine after being hit by the Minotaur, so she assumed he'd been acting the entire time. It is half accusation and half relief, and Sehan does not bother correcting whichever half she prefers to keep. The party menu now lists two names, his and Jisoo hands, with their conditions shown side by side. It is a small interface change with a large meaning. He can see the state of another party member at a glance, which turns guesswork into logistics and makes protecting her genuinely practical. Then the reward resolves and the ranking lands on Platinum. Sehan reads it twice. He guesses this is the bonus for Hunsters and reasons that he may well be the first person in the world to bring down a sentinel, which is exactly the sort of record that gods notice. Two abilities arrive, both upgradable and both the kind that are hard to obtain. He cannot quite believe the system handed him that much at once, and he is instantly suspicious of generosity from an organization that has never once been generous without arranging somewhere further down the road. Jisoo brings up Dongwon Park without being prompted. That person gives her the creeps, she says, and when San asks why, she simply calls him fishy. Wanting to serve someone whose face you can even see disturbs her, and the word avatar unsettles her just from hearing it said aloud. Her instinct is sharper than she realizes. Sehun is thinking about the celestial slayer, about the fact that even the blood demon could not completely remove the madness attached to it, and about a specialized killing technique that only celestial slayer users are able to master. The power in Jisoo's hands. He never mastered that technique himself. In his previous life he simply could not because he was not a celestial slayer and no amount of practice substitutes for the requirement. Watching Jisoo pick it up is strange for him, like seeing a locked door swing open for somebody standing right beside you. Martial techniques are upgradable by nature, which makes them difficult to obtain and even harder to train. Sean admits he never preferred them for exactly that reason. He built his first run around efficiency items and information and skills demanding years of investment did not fit a survival schedule that tight. Jisoo is learning faster than she should be. Even this coaching, the speed is unusual, and Sam notices without saying so. The girl he remembers leaving behind is turning into the most dangerous asset in his party, and he has to keep deciding how honest to be about that. The ability itself is brutal in the best possible. It boosts attack power and survivability at the same time, which he describes as catching two birds with one stone. And because it's upgradable, both the duration and the cooldown should improve steadily as she keeps pushing herself to use it further and more precisely. He checks the housekeeping too. Are the points being distributed to her properly, he asks, and she confirms that they are. There's a brooch in the mix that speeds one recovery and raises point gain by 20%, which is the kind of quiet advantage that compounds dangerously over the coming weeks. The sharing rules are more interesting. A shared ability can reach up to 80% effectiveness depending on the friendship level between party members, which means the relationship itself is functioning as a stat. Sehan hears that and visibly reconsiders several things he had been treating as purely tactical decisions. Better still, a shared ability does not carry the penalties of the original. That matters enormously here because Celestial Slayer's penalty is madness, and a version of the power without that attached is exactly the loophole a man with no god of his own has been quietly hunting for since the day he returned. The listing spells out the terms. Celestial Slayer S tier shared grant increased maximum attack damage and health regeneration when significant damage is dealt to or taken from a humanoid enemy. It rewards aggression against people-shaped things, which is a design choice that nobody paying attention should feel remotely comfortable about. Training continues with a blade and a great deal of complaining. He tells her the time and effort usually spent dodging can be spent attacking instead, since regeneration covers the difference, and that healing is only part of what the ability restores. She listens, swings, complains about the bruises, and gets noticeably sharper with every session. While she practices, Sien reads the forums. Two names keep appearing. One calls itself An Honest Life, which he decides belongs to a god about as far from honesty as a username can get, and the other goes by Young Jester, and neither of the two of them sounds remotely stable or particularly fond of humanity. He works out that the honest one is attached to Dongwon Park, which is useful and depressing in equal measure. The chatter is mostly small talk, gods bragging and sneering at each other, and then one line lands. The jester's avatar is wasting a rare ability on robbing a bank. That is a lead. Sehan follows it, and what he finds first is not a person but an object, glowing and numbered, sitting somewhere it should not be. Jisoo calls out that it is over here, warns him that it is dangerous, and he says this is the one he needed. It is the key to Loma Tower, and he has been looking for it since before this version of the world existed. San pockets it without explaining, because explaining would require describing a place none of them have seen yet and a plan that stretches across the next several years. Outside, the city is a mess. Jisoo looks at smashed windows and scattered debris and assumes the monsters did all of it. San does not correct her immediately because the truth is less comfortable. Some of this damage has fingerprints on it, and the fingerprints belong to people, not goblins. Laws stopped meaning anything within a single day. The police are gone, the military never arrived, and anyone with strength has already noticed that consequences are optional now. She asks whether this is the true nature of human beings, which is an unbearably heavy question coming from somebody who is still in school. His answer is more measured than she expects. Civilization has not collapsed completely, not yet, and there are still people trying to hold things together in the middle of all this. The problem is that the ones taking advantage move faster than the ones rebuilding, and they are much louder. He proves the point on the way, dropping a monster in a single strike and then complaining about his equipment. He cannot get a clean finish because the blade is dull, and he would like to change weapons soon. It is not vanity. It is a maintenance note from someone who fights constantly. Jisoo points out that he killed it in one blow anyway. He explains that he is supposed to deal additional damage to every humanoid enemy, and says it as casually as a man received. Half of what decides these fights is arithmetic that nobody standing nearby can see at all. She asks whether he is looking for money and he says no. Money is worthless now, and anybody hoarding cash has misunderstood the new economy entirely. Points buy survival. Paper does not. That is why a bank robbery in progress is such a strange thing to be deliberately walking toward. Inside, armed robbers are already working, and they are players rather than amateurs. One of them shouts that nobody mentioned anything about this bastard as Sehan wades through them. A police officer is caught in the middle of it, insisting that he is fine while very clearly not being fine. San goes through the robbers without much ceremony, and somebody chokes out a question about where that kind of power came from. The violence is not the surprising part in a city like this. The strength behind it is, and the reaction tells Sehan more than any answer would have given him. Then the questions turn around. Sehan points out that the officer had no business with a bank, since no bank is operating, and was not looking for shelter either. Every explanation the man offers gets closed off calmly, one at a time, until there is nothing left to hide behind. The tell is small, slightly dilated pupils, and surprise arriving at the exact moment Sehan said something the man should not have recognized. Being that startled by that particular sentence is suspicious on its own, and it gets said out loud while his composure comes apart in front of everyone. Above him hovers an observer that does not look like the others, and Sehan identifies it as the young jesters. He asks why the man does not simply reveal his special ability now. The answer arrives as a transformation, and the officer is replaced by a girl with golden eyes. She announces there's a busy person, as though the last 5 minutes were an inconvenience in her schedule. Jisoo asks what on earth is going on, and whether that was a transformation, and neither of them gets a straight answer, because straight answers are not what this girl trades in. Sehan refuses the framing immediately. She's the one who brought the robbers here in the first place, he says, so she does not get to play the victim of her own operation. Do not try that with him. The protest that follows is theatrical and almost entirely for show. He names the pattern he already knows. Mina and Dong, one of the best manipulators in this area, which is precisely why they keep appearing next to trouble that benefits them. Recognizing it early is his only advantage, since both of them are considerably better at talking than he has ever been. The negotiation is short. How long is a while, she asks, and Sehan tells her until they complete their second quest. She counters by mocking the offer, pointing out that he has not even finished that quest, and asking what points he could possibly put on the table in exchange for cooperation. So he stops negotiating. A quick flick of movement, she is holding her head because his stats sit above rank F now, and even a light touch stings. He notes that concentration breaks when it is interrupted by pain, which is a lesson he chooses to deliver physically rather than politely explain out loud. She caves loudly. All right, she says she gets it, and then she complains that it hurts and demands that he let go of her arm. It is the first time since she appeared that anything she says sounds unrehearsed, and Sehan uses the window while it is still open. Then how is he so strong, she demands, and the question is genuine. San tells her that an avatar is not automatically stronger than a player, though becoming one usually is getting stronger easier. Her power came with a sponsor. His came from a decade that she has not lived through. The scene at the bank does not hold up as a monster attack. There are no corpses, there is no property damage, and monsters would have no interest in human food. Somebody arranged this, which is a very different problem from the one everyone in the building assumed they had at first. That author is the young jester, and her reputation is not good. She is notorious for being a sadist, and Sehan explains that she would not allow an easy path even to her own avatar. Whatever Mina has been given, all of it arrived with conditions that were specifically designed to hurt her along the way. He softens the delivery slightly, telling Mina that he only discovered it by chance and that it is still very early, so she should not be upset. It is a strange kindness from a man who was twisting her arm a minute ago, and she does not know what to do with it. What Sehan is actually doing is applying pressure and then easing it. Mina is dangerous, well-informed, and working under a god who enjoys watching her struggle, and he makes sure she knows he knows. Nothing is settled between them, but the balance of the conversation has already moved in his favor. Jisoo watches the whole exchange and says nothing especially helpful. She has already accepted that Sehan operates on information she does not have, and she is starting to notice how comfortable he is doing it. That quiet observation will matter later, though neither of them says so out loud now. Players who have weapons from the start survive far more often, and Sehan holds a grudge about it, calling the game masters dirty for arranging things that way. He expects people to begin crafting their own equipment soon, because desperation has always been the fastest and cruelest teacher any economy has ever had. So he hands Jisoo armor. It is meant to protect the heart, and he tells her to wrap it around her body properly rather than treating it as decoration. She is startled by the gesture. He is being practical, and somehow the practicality is more affecting than sentiment would have been. She protests that she has no points to spend, and he waves it off, telling her she needs to raise her stats and can simply pay him back later. She thanks him carefully, promising to return the favor, and Sehan moves on quickly, uncomfortable at being thanked for basic logistics. Mina is appalled by the arithmetic. Equipment costs at least 200 points apiece, and she wants to know whether he even has enough to shop like that. Sehan replies that if he were her, he would have gathered points properly instead of robbing a bank purely for somebody else's entertainment value. Then he tests his new weapon. A yellow blade punches through a goblin and into the concrete behind it, and Jisoo asks whether it just pierced solid stone with a monster in the way. The answer is yes, which changes what fights he can take and how fast he can end them. Better still, it changes form and can be reused, which means one purchase covers several rolls at once. Sehan turns it over, asks himself whether he simply uses it like this, and starts working out possibilities. Flexible equipment is worth more than raw damage to a player fighting without allies. Ahead of them, the skyline waits, hazy and half-lit over streets nobody polices anymore. Compared with what they are looking at now, Sehan reflects that the escape they had to make earlier was relatively peaceful, which is a bleak way to describe a day that had a minotaur in it. He needles Mina about her adaptation speed, asking how she plans to survive if she's this slow to adjust. She snaps back that she has heard quite enough about his points. The bickering is constant, low-grade, and functions as the closest thing this group currently has to actual trust. Then he stops. He sees somebody ahead and tells both of them to hide behind the walls, and the tone changes instant. These people are watching for outsiders, screening anyone approaching, and that behavior only makes sense if they are protecting something valuable or hiding something worse than valuable. His guess is competition. If their quest is a competitive one, something along the lines of a battle royale, that treating strangers as threats is rational rather than paranoid. He tells Mina that when he says us, he means himself and Jisoo, and then asks her without much warmth whether she understands that distinction clearly. The watchers are careless. They are not really paying attention, and Sehan decides there is no need to be nervous, which coming from him counts as an assessment rather than bravado. He moves in close while they talk, timing his approach against the gaps in their attention rather than against their positions. A heavy impact, then something dragged and dropped with a grumble about the weight. Two voices complain that this keeps happening far too often and that their shift is nearly finished. San stays where he is, listening, learning the rhythm of their patrol and filing every detail away for later use. Elsewhere, another group is riding a winning streak and enjoying it far too much. At this rate, one of them laughs they will beat the boss in one go. Confidence like that has a short shelf in a world where difficulty is set by an audience that wants surprises. The second stage boss answers them. Somebody stammers a question about whether this is really it, and the answer arrives with claws and a wingspan balloon enormous, filling a space that was supposed to be their victory lap. The mood in the room collapses considerably faster than their formation manages to retreat. Someone screams they cannot do this on their own. The order goes out for everyone to start running, and it is the same mistake made on the very first day, repeated by people who should have learned better by now, because panic never improves with experience and always spreads faster than good instructions. The exit is gone. The creature has blocked their escape, and that realization lands harder than the attack itself did. They believed the boss could not chase them past that door, and the assumption was the entire plan, which means that they no longer have any workable plan at all now. The room comes apart, impacts screaming, stone breaking, and people who were joking a minute ago are now trying to remember which direction they came from. Somebody shouts asking what they are supposed to do now, and nobody left standing in the group has an answer worth saying out loud. San is thinking about rules rather than claws. The real issue is the quest requirements, because only players who started from the same location can enter the boss room together. That single restriction decides who is able to help whom, and it quietly turns any possible rescue into a brutal logistics problem with a deadline. Elsewhere, the survivors are still taking stock of each other. Somebody laughs off a recent success as nothing more than luck, and gets told they seem a good deal more humble than the last time they met. Even now, in a room full of casualties, people are quietly ranking each other. Attention turns to leadership. Somebody asks he the student council president, and Jisoo confirms that they mean Hyungin again, since his name keeps surfacing wherever survivors have organized. Whatever else has changed, the group that formed around him is still very much the center of gravity across this entire district. Sehan brushes off the question of what he has been doing, saying it was nothing much and that he simply took care of a monster. The understatement is deliberate. He has no interest in a reputation yet. Because reputations attract gods and gods attract exactly the wrong kind of attention. Then footsteps, fast and getting closer. Somebody announces that they found a way out, and the response is immediate demands for something better than that. Because a way out from a person in this condition could mean almost anything. The room turns toward the sound, hoping and bracing at once. It is Sehan. Jisoo says his name in disbelief. Somebody else says thank goodness he made it. And there are frantic questions about whether he is hurt at all. He is breathing hard and bleeding, and he is standing, which is more than the situation had any right to produce today. Cloth wraps tight around his grip, metal settles into his hand, and Sehan looks up with the expression of a man who has done all this before and intends to do it better. The boss is still waiting, and his second playthrough is only beginning. If you enjoyed this recap, please like and subscribe.